There's a strange lottery in my town. There's a 1% chance you win and a 1% chance that you die. The prize master turned the crank on the small brass drum and pulled the joined ticket from the mouth of it and unfolded it slowly with fingers that were the color of paper left out in the sun too long. He read it without looking at us. He said, "White." My sister made a sound behind me that I had never heard her make before. It was not joy. It was not relief. It was the sound of a person realizing, all the way down to the bone, that she had made a mistake that could not be taken back. The bare bulb over the counter flickered once. Somewhere at the back of the room, an old man I had known since childhood coughed into his sleeve and did not look up. I felt Wren's fingers close around my arm. She whispered, "Chris." I put mine back in. "Last Thursday. I couldn't let you die alone." And in that instant, standing in the Halston Grove Prize Hall on the second Sunday of December at exactly 3:14 in the afternoon, I understood what my sister had done, and what I had done, and what the prize master had been waiting for since 1889. Halston Grove sits in a pocket of the Ozarks that most maps just leave as a blank green square. Population 1,632, give or take whatever the annual draw takes out. One 2-lane road in from the interstate, one 2-lane road out. A gas station that closes at 8 p.m., a diner that closes at 9, a Congregationalist church with a leaking roof, and, right at the fork where elm becomes ash, a squat brick building the size of a small post office with no sign on the door. That is the prize hall. That is where the lottery lives. My family has been in Halston Grove since 1889, when my great-great-grandfather Cassius Oberlander helped lay the rails through the Western Hollow. There is a plaque on the courthouse with his name on it. There is a whole cemetery behind the church with our name on the headstones. That is why we cannot leave. Or that is what my father used to say, back when he could still say anything at all. My father, Alwyn Oberlander, disappeared from the driver's seat of his pickup truck on a Sunday morning in April 12 years ago. The truck was still running. The seatbelt was still buckled. His coffee, half drunk, was still in the cup holder, still warm when Sheriff Delphine Vasquez arrived. There was no blood. There were no footprints leading away. There were no cameras on that stretch of road. His paper ticket from that year's draw was folded neatly on the passenger seat, and where the star should have been printed there was a single black circle. An exception. Nobody in town uses the word out loud. Sheriff Vasquez took one look at that circle and told my mother, very calmly, that Alwyn had gone traveling, and might come back and might not. She did not file a missing person report. She did not open a case file. She drove home. My mother stopped speaking that afternoon, not out of grief exactly, but out of a superstition I was too young to understand. My sister Wren was 12 years old the day the truck was found. I was 15. Our mother lived another 4 years, mostly in the back bedroom with the curtains drawn, and by the time she died, Wren had already decided what her life was going to be about. She was going to bring our father back. She read every book about circles she could get her hands on. She interviewed old-timers. She learned the mechanics of the draw with the same methodical hunger some kids use to memorize baseball stats. What she learned was this: if you draw a circle, you disappear from the world in whatever way the prize master finds most personally amusing. If you draw a white star, you can nullify a circle. You can bring back an exception. Nobody had ever done it in living memory, but the rule was on the wall in the prize hall in the same faded paint as the rest of the rules. My sister decided she would be the first. She played every year starting at 18, 6 tickets, 6 years of gray-white nothing results, most of them nothings, all of them keeping the door open. That was the deal she made with herself. As long as she was still playing, our father was still somewhere. As long as she still drew, the possibility of him existed. I did not play. Not once. I got a job at the feed store when I was 17, and I ran a spreadsheet in my head every year weighing my chances of drawing a circle or a gray star against the chances of drawing a white one that could bring Dad back. The math was terrible. The math was always going to be terrible. But Wren was better at math than I was. Wren was better at everything than I was, if I'm honest. She had scholarships. She had a place at a state school she turned down. She stayed in Halston Grove because the door only stayed open here. The prize master was already old when I was born. He is very tall, taller than any man I have ever met in person, and thin the way a birch tree is thin. His skin has a slightly wrong color, like paper that has been left out in the sun. His teeth do not fit his mouth. That is the part everyone remembers first. They are too many and too pointed, and they don't meet correctly when he closes his lips. When he speaks, which he does very quietly, he sounds like a man reading a legal document out loud in an empty room. He wears the same gray coat every year. He runs the draw on the second Sunday of every October, and he keeps office hours the rest of the year on the first Wednesday of every month from 10 a.m. to noon, and if you go into the prize hall during those hours, he will speak to you politely, and then he will not look at you again for weeks after. I want to tell you about Emmett Sowersby, because you have to understand what a gray star actually does before I can tell you what I did to my sister. Emmett was my best friend from grade school. Shy, big glasses, a stutter he mostly grew out of. His parents were sharecroppers on a bottomland farm that got smaller every year. He played the lottery at 21 to try to pay for a semester at the State Agricultural College. He drew gray. He asked, very carefully, for enough money to finish his degree. He was careful. He had watched other people be stupid. And still, the next 3 weeks were the worst I have ever spent with a friend. Something was in the shadows of his house. Not a metaphor. He would freeze mid-sentence, tracking a movement behind me that I could not see. He lost 15 pounds. He stopped answering the door. He stopped answering the phone. He stopped eating. One morning in the middle of November, he showed up at the feed store and hugged me. He said, "Chris, I got in. I'm going to college. My new friends are waiting for me in the car." His eyes were wet. His shoulders were pulled backward like somebody was gripping them from behind. He walked out of the store and I never saw him again. His parents found his room empty and a scholarship acceptance letter on his desk from a college that, when I called them the next week, had no record of Emmett Sowersby ever applying. The letter was addressed to him in beautiful handwriting. There was no return address, only a small circular seal in the upper right corner. His mother kept the letter in a drawer for 6 years. She showed it to me once. It had gone completely blank. That is what a gray star does. That is the thing I traded my life for. Wren drew gray on the second Sunday of October this year. She came home from the prize hall at 3:14 in the afternoon, and she did not cry. She sat down at her kitchen table and she took the ticket out of her jacket pocket, and she flattened it very carefully with the palm of her hand, and she said, "Chris, I got a gray. I need to write some things down before the shadows come." That was all she said for about 12 minutes. Then she got up, made 2 cups of Earl Grey with too much honey in each, set one in front of me, and started listing what she wanted done with her body. Cremation. No service. Ashes into the Little Piney River at the old railroad trestle. She had planned all of this at some point in the last 12 years. She had a notebook. The notebook had a table of contents. That was when I understood I was not going to let her die. The transfer rules are printed on a laminated card the prize master keeps behind the counter. You can take another person's ticket if that person consents in your presence and the prize master signs off. You can also join tickets, which locks 2 outcomes together into a single result, though the exact mechanics of joining are not explained anywhere I have ever been able to find them. The next morning, I got up at 5:12, put on a clean shirt, walked the 12 blocks to the prize hall, and confirmed with the printed sign on the door that the first Wednesday of the month came around in 6 days. I did not tell Wren. I could not tell Wren. She would have physically fought me. She is smaller than me by a full head, but she has an unreasonable amount of forearm strength for a librarian. I knew what she would do, and I knew what I was going to do, and I made sure she could not stop me. The first person I tried to talk to was Sheriff Vasquez. I sat across from her in her office at the courthouse and I said, plainly, "Sheriff, my sister drew gray. I want to know if there is any legal way to invalidate the ticket." Sheriff Vasquez is 54 years old. She has been the sheriff of Halston Grove for 21 years. She was the one who found my father's truck. She looked at me across her desk with an expression I recognized from every childhood trip to her office when I had broken a window with a baseball. Patient, tired, sad. She said, "Chris, honey, the draw is not a legal matter." I said, "It is a matter of somebody dying." She said, "Then it is a health matter, and I am not a doctor." She said this while looking at the door. She wanted me to leave. She had wanted me to leave the second I sat down. I tried Reverend Bramble next. Reverend Alaric Bramble is the pastor of the Halston Grove Congregationalist Church, and he has known me since my baptism. He met me in the sacristy on a Thursday afternoon. I told him about Wren's gray ticket. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Christopher, there are things this town holds dear that predate the church. When your ancestors came here in 1889, they made agreements with what was already in these hills. I do not have the authority to break those agreements. Neither does the diocese. The best I can do is pray with you." He prayed with me. It was a good prayer. When we finished, he asked me not to visit again about this matter and to please not mention it during coffee hour. I walked out of the church and I sat on the steps in a cold October wind and I understood, all the way down, that no institution in this town was going to help me. Dr. Ines Talmadge runs a family practice out of a converted salt box on 3rd Street. She is 38 years old and she moved to Halston Grove 5 years ago from Little Rock because her wife inherited property here. She is not from here. That was why I went to her. I sat in her exam room with the paper crinkling under me, and I told her the whole thing. My father, my mother, Wren, Emmett Sowersby, the shadows, the prize master, the gray ticket. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she took off her stethoscope and set it on the counter, and she said, very quietly, "Chris, in the 5 years I have been practicing here, I have signed 23 death certificates that I do not believe reflect the actual cause of death. I know what happens here. I have written to the state medical board. Nothing comes back. My wife has begged me to move. She said, 'I am so sorry, I cannot help you.' That was the first day I truly considered running. I sat in my truck outside the doctor's office for an hour and a half, and I mapped out an entire second life in my head. I would drive Wren to Springfield in the middle of the night. From there, we would take a bus to Kansas City. From Kansas City to Denver. From Denver, maybe Portland. New names. Cash only. Off the grid. I had $11,000 in savings and Wren had another $8,000 in a coffee can under her sink. It could be done. I drove home rehearsing exactly how I was going to sell it to her. I walked in her front door and I found her sitting at the kitchen table with the notebook open and a photograph of our father on the table next to it. She looked up. She said, "Chris, I know what you are about to suggest. I need you to understand that if I leave Halston Grove, Dad is never coming back." I said, "Wren, Dad is already never coming back." I said this out loud for the first time in 12 years. Her face did not change. She said, "You do not know that." I said, "I know that we cannot keep bleeding for him." She said, "I do not consider it bleeding." I sat down across from her. I looked at the photograph. Alwyn Oberlander, 39 years old, holding a fishing rod at the trestle bridge on the Little Piney, smiling at the camera. I said, "If I take your ticket, will you leave town?" She said, "You are not taking my ticket." I said, "If I take your ticket, I want you to promise me that you will leave, and you will not come back, ever." She looked at me for a long time. Then she started crying, in a way I had not seen since she was a child. And she said, "Chris, please. Please do not." That was all she said. But she did not say no. I went to the prize hall on the first Wednesday of November at exactly 10:03 a.m. There was a bell over the door that did not ring when I opened it. The room smelled like cedar and something faintly sour underneath. Behind the counter stood the prize master, exactly as I remembered him, taller than the ceiling looked like it could hold, thin as a coat rack, the smile that could not close. He said, "Mr. Oberlander, I did not expect to see you inside these walls." His voice was completely flat. He had a small square of paper on the counter in front of him and a fountain pen with a nib the color of dried blood. He said, "I understand you are here to accept your sister's ticket." I said, "I am." He said, "You have not previously participated." I said, "No." He said, "That is unusual. Very few people participate for the first time in the second position." He was still smiling. He was watching my throat. He slid the transfer form across the counter. I signed my name. He countersigned in a hand that did not seem to touch the paper. He took Wren's gray ticket from an envelope he had already prepared, and he handed me a new blank ticket with my own printed number on it. He then asked, in the same flat voice, whether I intended to join the tickets. I had rehearsed this answer. I said yes. I said I wanted to join my own new ticket to the gray I had just accepted, so that if I drew white, it would automatically counter the gray. He tilted his head at me. His teeth pressed against his lower lip. He said, "That is not the ordinary use of the joining mechanic." I said, "I would like to use it anyway." He was quiet for what felt like a long time. Then he said, "Very well, Mr. Oberlander. Very well indeed." He wrote something down in a black leather ledger with pages the color of old milk. He said, "Come back on the second Sunday of December." I said, "You do a special draw for me?" He said, "I do a special draw for anyone who joins tickets outside the annual cycle. It is in the rules, it is on the board." He gestured at the board on the wall behind him without looking at it. I looked. It was there in faded paint. Special draw procedure. 60 days. Same odds, same rules. He said, 60 days is enough time for you to consider whether you would prefer to withdraw the ticket exchange. If you do not appear at the prize hall on the second Sunday of December at 3 in the afternoon, the tickets will process automatically at their default state, which will result in your sister's original outcome. I said, "You mean she dies?" He said, "I mean the outcome processes." He was still smiling. His teeth caught the light from the bare bulb over the counter, and I remember thinking they looked wet. I walked out into the cold and I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute before I remembered how to move my legs. 60 days. I had 60 days to find a mathematical solution to a game that had killed people in this town for well over 100 years. I had 60 days to find any loophole, any precedent, any story of a person who had beaten the draw. And I had 60 days to prepare Wren for the possibility that she was going to have to bury me at the trestle in December. I called her from the sidewalk. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was very quiet. She said, "You did it, did you not?" I said, "I did it." She said, "Chris." I said, "I need you to leave town, tonight." There was a long silence on the line. Then she said, "I will leave when it is over, not before. And do not fight me on this." She hung up. I sat on the curb outside the prize hall until the sun was fully down. I could see, through the front window, the outline of the prize master moving around inside, cleaning the counter, filing the ledger, straightening the rules on the wall. He worked slowly. He worked precisely. At exactly noon, he had closed the shutter over the door and turned the sign to closed, and he had come back out only once to sweep the porch. I watched him sweep. He swept in one direction only, north to south, in strokes that never crossed each other. And I remember thinking, with a clarity I have not felt since, that whatever the prize master was, he had been a man once. Somebody had swept a porch like that before him. Somebody had stood behind that counter with those same teeth. And somebody, at some point, in some other decade, had drawn 2 white stars. The next morning I drove to Fayetteville. It took me 2 hours and 40 minutes because I stopped twice to be sure nobody was following me. I had emailed a professor at the University of Arkansas named Dr. Ophelia Vanderberg, who ran a research group in stochastic processes. I had described the draw in very careful terms as a historical folk lottery I was researching for a personal genealogy project. She had agreed to meet me at a coffee shop on Dixon Street at 11 a.m. She was 51, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan the color of a bruised plum. She listened to my description of the mechanics for 20 minutes without touching her coffee. Then she said, "You are describing what is functionally a Markov process with an absorbing state. If your gray star and white star are truly independent 1% probabilities per ticket, then joining 2 tickets does not linearly double either probability. It complicates the sample space in a specific way." She took a napkin and drew a small tree diagram on it in ballpoint pen. She said, "For a single ticket you have 3 outcomes: white at 1%, gray at 1%, blank at 98%. For a joined ticket, if the draw mechanism truly treats them as a single event with 2 draws, then you have 9 combined outcomes: white-white at 0.01%, white-gray at 0.02% counted symmetrically, gray-gray at 0.01%, white-blank at 1.96%, and so on. Your best-case scenario is drawing at least 1 white star, which is roughly a 1.99% event on the joined ticket. Your worst case, in your framing, is a white-white result, which occurs at approximately 1 in 10,000. She looked up. She said, "You have said the double white is fatal." I said, "Yes." She said, "Then, in a joined ticket, you are trading a 99% chance of your sister's death for a marginally worse survival profile of your own." I sat with that for a long time. Dr. Vanderberg drank her coffee. Then she said quietly, "Chris, this is not a normal probability problem. If the outcomes are truly binding in the way you have described, you are not describing a lottery. You are describing a contract with something that has an incentive to alter its own probabilities. In my experience, entities that write contracts also cheat at contracts." She wrote on the napkin, "Rule of thumb: if a system claims 1% and enforces it publicly, the actual rate is almost always higher. Small towns bury bodies. Ledgers can be edited." She slid the napkin across the table. She said, "I want to help you. My grandmother came from a town like yours. I do not know what your grandmother would tell you to do, but mine would tell you to look at the historical record. Find out how many white stars have actually been drawn." I drove back to Halston Grove that night in a state I did not have a name for. I went to Wren's apartment. I told her I needed the diary of every draw that had ever been recorded in Halston Grove. She said, "You realize the ledger is in the prize hall, and the prize master keeps it behind the counter." I said, "There has to be a record somewhere else. The town had to file something. Tax paperwork. Death certificates. Something." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she went into her bedroom and she came out with a plastic file box and she set it on the table. She said, "Chris, I have been building this since I was 16. I have obituaries. I have newspaper clippings from the county paper. I have 3 years of church bulletins I stole out of the recycling. I have transcripts of interviews I did with 11 old-timers before they died. Nobody has ever asked to see it, not even you. I sat at her kitchen table for 4 days. I did not go to work. I called the feed store and I said I had the flu. Ren brought me sandwiches. I built a spreadsheet. Every draw I could confirm going back to 1912, when the local paper started running the results in October as a small item on page 9. I found 118 confirmed gray stars over that period. I found 113 confirmed white stars. The numbers were close, but not identical. There was a small, persistent surplus of gray, not enough to be statistical noise, not over that long a period. Whatever the prize master was doing, he was tilting the outcomes toward death by roughly 4% per century. Ren looked at the spreadsheet over my shoulder and she said, "He's harvesting." That was the word she used. Harvesting. I did not sleep that night. I lay on her couch and I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. The threat pulse came on the 9th day. I got a phone call at 2:11 in the morning from a number I did not recognize, and when I picked up there was no voice on the other end, only the sound of somebody sweeping a wooden porch, back and forth, in one direction. It went on for 12 seconds. Then the line went dead. I looked at Ren, who was asleep in her armchair with her legs tucked under her, and I made a decision. I called Sylvie Ashkenazi at 8 a.m. Sylvie is a journalist I had known in high school. She had left Halston Grove at 18 and never come back, and now she wrote for a regional paper based out of Springfield. I told her, over the phone, everything. The draw, the prize master, the spreadsheet, the porch sweeping. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Chris, I am getting in the car right now." Sylvie showed up at Ren's apartment at 4 p.m. She had a laptop and a voice recorder, and a camera, and the deep circles under her eyes of a woman who had been chasing a story her whole life, without knowing which one. She and Ren looked at each other for a moment. They had known each other in grade school. Sylvie said, "Ren, I am so sorry about your ticket." Ren said, "Chris took it. He is the one you need to interview." Sylvie interviewed me for 6 hours. I gave her the spreadsheet. I gave her every clipping. I gave her Emmett Soursby's blank scholarship letter, which I had asked his mother for months ago and she had given me without a word. Sylvie photographed everything. She left at midnight with a small hard drive full of scanned documents and my sister's diary. She said, "I need 3 weeks. I will publish before your draw." 2 nights later, Sylvie's car was found off Highway 65 at the bottom of a ravine outside Damascus. She was alive. She had a broken collarbone and a concussion and a fractured wrist. The Arkansas State Police report said she had swerved to avoid a deer. There was no deer. There was no evidence of another vehicle. There was, however, no laptop, no camera, no hard drive, and no small brown notebook that she always kept in her jacket pocket. I drove to the hospital in Little Rock. She was propped up in bed. She was very pale. When she saw me, she started to cry. She said, "Chris, I am so sorry. I do not remember the road. I do not remember getting into the car. The last thing I remember is walking out of Ren's apartment." She said, "Whatever is in that town, it does not want to be seen." She said, "I am not coming back." I spent that night in a motel outside Little Rock, and I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about how long I had left. 28 days. I called Ren at 3 a.m. She picked up. She said, "Sylvie?" I said, "Alive. Not okay. Not coming back." Ren was quiet. Then she said, "Chris, I have been thinking. I want you to go into the prize hall on the first Wednesday of December, before the draw, and I want you to withdraw the exchange." I said, "Ren." She said, "I am not asking. I am telling you. I have had 12 years to prepare for this. You have had a month. It is not fair. It is not honorable. It is not what Dad would have wanted." I said, "Dad wanted to protect us." She said, "Then let him have wanted that for me too." I hung up on my sister for the first time in my adult life. I drove back to Halston Grove the next morning. I did not go to Ren's apartment. I went home. I sat at my own kitchen table with the spreadsheet in front of me and I ran the numbers one more time. And that was when I saw it. The pattern I had missed on the first 4 passes. Of the 113 white stars drawn in the recorded history of Halston Grove, 72 of them had gone to the same 11 families. Oberlander was one of them. Cassius Oberlander, my great-great-grandfather, was one of the men who had helped found the draw. His grandson had drawn white in 1932. His granddaughter had drawn white in 1958. My father had drawn a circle in 2013. My family's winning streak, at least on paper, was a mathematical impossibility. Unless the draw was not random for founder families. Unless there was a preferred draw. Unless. I called Ren. My hands were shaking. I said, Ren, listen to me. I think the draw is rigged for founder families. I think we have always been more likely to draw white than gray. I think it is why Dad got a circle instead of a death. I think circles are what the prize master gives founder family members when he wants to punish them without breaking his own rules. There was a long silence on the line. Then Ren said, quietly, Then what happens if I draw again this year? I said, You already drew. You drew gray. She said, Chris, I withdrew my original ticket from the annual draw the day after you accepted the transfer. I got it back. He gave it to me. He said it was mine again. It has been on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks. I have been afraid to look at it. I said, Look at it now. I heard her walk into the kitchen. I heard paper unfold. There was a long silence. She said in a voice so small I almost could not hear her, Chris, it is white. My legs went out from under me. I sat down on the floor of my own kitchen. I said, Ren, do not tell anyone. Do not go outside. Do not open the door for anyone until I get there. She said, What does this mean? I said, It means the prize master gave you back a winning ticket, and he did not tell you. It means he wanted you to hold that ticket in reserve. It means he wanted a double win on my behalf. I said, Ren, do not touch that ticket again. She said, Chris, why would he want that? I said, Because we are the last 2 Oberlanders in Halston Grove, and he is finishing something my great-great-grandfather started. I drove to Ren's apartment at 85 miles an hour on back roads. I ran the red light on 3rd Street. I made it to her building in 11 minutes. She met me at the door with the ticket in her hand. It was white, unmistakably, sharply, impossibly white. I took it from her. I put it in my mouth. I chewed it. I swallowed it. Ren stared at me. I said, It has to be destroyed. If it exists in the world when I draw on the 2nd Sunday of December, and my ticket also comes up white, we die. She said, You cannot just eat evidence like that. I said, Watch me. She sat down on the couch. She started laughing in a way that was not laughter. I sat down next to her. I put my arms around her. We stayed like that for a long time, and that was the last good hour we had before December. I made a plan. I would go to the prize hall on the 1st Wednesday of December, 4 days before the draw, and I would withdraw the joining. I would let Ren's original gray ticket process at its default state. She would die. I would live. I would leave town. I would take her ashes. I would put them at the trestle. I would find a way to make it right. I would give her the good death she had planned in the notebook. It was the worst plan I had ever considered in my life. It was the only one where I was certain one of us survived. I told Ren over dinner. She listened. She did not cry. She said, Chris, I need you to understand something. If you withdraw and I die, and you leave town, our father stays gone forever. Are you prepared to be the last Oberlander who chose to let that happen? I said, Yes. She said, You are lying. I said, I know. I did not withdraw. I could not withdraw. On the 1st Wednesday of December, I sat in my truck outside the prize hall from 9:45 to 11:58, and I could not open the door of the truck. I watched the prize master through the window. He worked. He filed. He straightened the rules. At 12:01, he closed the shutter and turned the sign, and I drove home and I called Ren and I said, I could not do it. She said, I know. She said, Come over. I made stew. That was the last full week I had with my sister. We did not talk about the draw. We watched old movies. We played cards. She taught me how to make her recipe for cornbread. On the Saturday before the draw, we drove out to the trestle, and we sat on the wooden ties, and we watched the little piney run under our feet. She said, I love you, Chris. I said, I love you too. The draw is held in the prize hall on the 2nd Sunday of October each year, but for a joined ticket special, the mechanic is the same. 3 p.m. Doors open at 2:45. Anybody in town may attend. In practice, only about 30 people ever come. Regulars, watchers, the kind of people who like to be present when something ends. I walked through the door at 2:49. Ren was 3 steps behind me. The prize master was behind his counter. Gray coat, gray hands, that smile like a wound. He nodded at me. He nodded at Ren. He set the joined ticket on the counter in front of him and the small brass drum with the hand crank that I had somehow never seen him touch before. He said, Chris Oberlander, Ren Oberlander. This draw is for the joined outcome of ticket 0891 and ticket 0892. Do you both consent to proceed? We said yes, together. Our voices did not shake. I was proud of both of us. He turned the crank. The drum rattled. It sounded like teeth. He pulled the joined ticket from the drum and unfolded it slowly, and he read the outcome without changing his expression at all. He said, "White." I made a sound I did not know I could make. Ren grabbed my arm. Somebody in the back of the room clapped once and stopped. The prize master looked at me. He said, "Mr. Oberlander, you have won the joined draw. Under the rules of joining, your outcome is now processed against the existing ticket held by your sister, ticket 0892. Do you wish to declare the nature of your prize before the second processing?" I said, "Wait." He said, "Yes." I said, "What second processing?" He said, "Your sister currently holds an unresolved white star. She resubmitted her ticket to the December cycle at my invitation." He tilted his head. He said, "Did she not tell you?" I looked at Ren. Her face was completely white. Her lips were moving. She said, "Chris, I am so sorry. I could not let you die alone. I put it back in." I said, "You put it back in." She said, "I put it back in. Last Thursday, he said if I resubmitted my ticket, and yours came up white, and we joined the outcomes into a single household result, we could split the win. He said it was a legal move under the joining rules. He said it would make my star nullify your star instead of you nullifying mine. He said we could both live." The prize master had not stopped smiling. He was not looking at us anymore. He was looking at his ledger. He was writing. His pen made a sound like a small animal running across a wood floor. Ren was crying. I understood, all the way down to my teeth, what had just happened. I understood what he had done. I said, very quietly, "You told my sister she could save my life if she resubmitted a white ticket." He said, without looking up, "I informed her of a rule that is on the board." I said, "That rule creates a double win." He said, "That is one interpretation." I said, "You knew." He said, "I knew that both of you were in play. I knew that either of you might come to me." He looked up finally. His teeth were showing. He said, "Chris, I have been running this draw for a very long time. I have watched 39 Oberlanders play. Your great-great-grandfather made me a promise. He said his line would keep drawing until my ledger was closed. I have been very patient. Your father tried to close it. I made him an exception. Your sister tried to reopen it. I let her. And you?" He said, "You wanted to save her." He said, "That was all I ever needed you to do." I put myself between Ren and the counter. I did not know why. I could not think. I said, "You cannot process both wins." He said, "I do not have to. The double win processes itself." He closed the ledger. He set the pen down. Somewhere very far away, I heard the wind pick up outside the prize hall. Not October wind, not December wind, something older. The bare bulb over the counter flickered. Ren grabbed my hand. I grabbed hers back. I said, "Ren, whatever happens now, I love you." She said, "I love you." The prize master said, "That is very sweet." He said it without any tone at all. He raised his right hand. The teeth were suddenly closer. He said, "The rule is on the wall. It has been on the wall since 1889. Do not win twice." He said, "I do enjoy the ones who read the rules." What happened next, I am going to describe carefully, because it is important to me that you understand. There was no light. There was no thunder. There was no sound at all. The bulb over the counter went out. The prize hall filled with a stillness so complete that I could hear my sister's heart beating next to me. And then, in the dark, the prize master spoke one more time. He said, "Chris, you wanted to save her. That was the wish you never made out loud, so I am going to grant it. She lives. You take my place. It is the only way the ledger balances." I said, "No." He said, "It was not a question." Ren screamed. I felt something cold press against my throat. It was not a knife. It was not a hand. It was a weight. The weight of a lot of decades, waiting to move into me. I could not fight it. I understood I had never been able to fight it. I woke up in a hospital bed in Fayetteville 12 days later. My sister was in the chair next to me. She had lost 8 pounds. Her eyes were the eyes of a person who has watched something they cannot describe. She told me what she had seen. She said the prize master had reached across the counter and touched my forehead, and I had gone still, and then a great deal of light had come out of my chest, and the prize master had breathed it in, and then he had collapsed onto the floor of the prize hall like a coat falling off a hook. She said the paramedics had arrived 4 minutes later. She said the coroner in Halston Grove had refused to take the prize master's body. She said the prize Vasquez had cried for the first time in 21 years. She said the prize haul was still standing, but the door was locked and nobody had opened it since. I asked her if she felt any different. She said no. She said her ticket had disappeared out of her hand in the moment the light came out of me. She said she thought the double win had absorbed itself into me because I had chewed the first ticket. She said Dr. Vanderberg's math had described a case that had never been considered because it had never happened before. She said the prize master had been holding the ledger open for 135 years, and I had, somehow, been the closing entry. She said she did not know if that meant our father was coming back. She had checked the pickup truck on the shoulder where they had left it 12 years ago. It was still there. The seatbelt was still buckled. The coffee was long dry. There was no man in the driver's seat, and no folded paper with a circle on it, and no answer. It has been 14 months. I live in a small apartment in Fayetteville, 3 floors up, with a view of a parking lot and a lot of pine trees behind it. I work part-time in the university library shelving books. I do not go home. Ren and I meet for lunch every second Sunday of the month at a diner off Dixon Street. It is not intentional. It is just when we both have time. She still lives in Halston Grove. She refused to leave. She said somebody had to be there in case Dad came back. She keeps his pickup truck under a tarp behind her apartment. Sylvie Ashkenazi never returned to Halston Grove, but she wrote a long feature about the town for the Springfield paper, 8 months after the December draw. It did not use the words lottery or prize master, but every family in the 11 founder lines called Ren the week it ran. Not one of them thanked her. Not one of them apologized. The prize haul is still locked. The town has not appointed a new prize master. The rules on the wall have started to fade, according to Ren, who peeks through the front window sometimes. The annual draw did not happen last October. There was no drum. There was no crank. There was no line of townspeople quietly filing through the door. Sheriff Vasquez retired in the spring. Reverend Bramble had a stroke in June. Dr. Ines Talmadge and her wife moved back to Little Rock in July, and she wrote me a letter apologizing again for not being able to help me when I needed it. Emmett Sowersby's mother came to see Ren in September and gave her Emmett's blank scholarship letter, which had, in the 12 years since he vanished, developed a very small circle in the upper right corner in place of the seal. Ren keeps it in her file box. She checks it every week to see if the circle has changed. I dream about the prize master. Not every night. Maybe 2 nights out of 7. In the dream, I am behind the counter in the prize hall and I am cleaning it. I am sweeping the porch north to south in strokes that do not cross. There is a ledger open in front of me, and the pages are blank. There is a small brass drum on a stand, and I am not turning the crank, but I can feel that it wants to be turned. I wake up with my jaw aching. My teeth do not feel right in my mouth. Dr. Vanderberg, who has become something like a friend, tells me this is post-traumatic and will fade. She has been telling me this for a year. She is a very smart woman and I trust her math, but I do not entirely trust her on this one. Some nights when I wake up, I check the mirror. My teeth still fit. So far. Ren asked me once, at the diner, whether I felt any of him inside me, any of the prize master, any of the man he must have been before he took the counter. I told her no, because it was the answer she needed. It was not the true answer. The true answer is that when I was 15 years old, before the draw meant anything to me, I once helped a very old man across the street outside the prize hall, and he had thanked me by name. He had said, "Chris Oberlander, you are a kind boy." He had said it in a voice that was completely flat. He had said it with too many teeth. I have wondered ever since whether the prize master had already known which door was opening for him, whether he had picked me the day my father disappeared, whether I was always going to be sitting in this chair, whether my father is out there somewhere waiting to come back. I do not know. That is the sentence I fall asleep to. Ren does not ask me about it anymore. She keeps the truck under the tarp. She keeps the file box on her kitchen table. She keeps a place set at Thanksgiving for a man who has been gone for 12 years. I go home for the holiday. I sit next to the empty chair. I pass the potatoes. I do not eat much. On the drive back to Fayetteville, I stop at the trestle. I look down at the little piney. I think about Emmett. I think about the shy kid he was and the shape I saw on his shoulders. I think about all the people whose names are in Ren's spreadsheet. And then I get back in my truck and I drive north. Some doors, once you close them, you spend the rest of your life listening for the sound of them opening back up.